Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at the last of the spell compendiums that were published by Wizards of the Coast in the late 90s. This is the Priest Spell Compendium. And this is all the cleric and priest spells from 1975 to 1995. These were published in 1999. They were last of the series. And they go through all the various priest cleric spells for Zero Edition, Basic, First, Second, anything that was published for D&D between 75 and 95. Virtually every cleric spell is going to be found in here. You're going to hear me say cleric more than priest in this video. I play First Edition. I've never gotten used to saying priest. Sorry. So for today, on page 121, volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the Priest Spell Compendium from Wizards of the Coast, and a lot of the information from TSR. All right, Priest Spell Compendium. This is volume 1. I got these back around 2000. They were pretty new when I bought them. I remember getting them as 3rd edition was coming on sale, and a couple places were closing these out, so I was lucky enough to snap those up at the time. So we'll take a look at the front, and there's the back, going all the way back to 1975. So 75 to 95 on these. There's your forward, your introduction. And this is pretty standard stuff for the spell compendiums. It gives you what the spheres are and the specialty spheres. 2nd edition got into a bunch of specialty priest things. And then DM always decides whether priesthood is allowed a certain spell. I've always listened to my players if they felt that a certain spell was necessary for their character, and they kind of gave me a reason for it. I wasn't real stingy about it. These spells, of course, because they're divine spells, they're given to you directly by your deity or his minions, so there's no research involved beyond knowing what the spell is and does. I did a campaign a while ago where, and this was probably back around the time I got these books actually, where there was a cleric involved and they had to quest so he would learn knowledge of spells. And once he gained the knowledge of the spells, he was then able to ask his deity for them. So he had to learn what they were before he could ask for them. I thought it was an interesting campaign. It actually went pretty well. Went for the better part of a year. As you say, I run a lot of campaigns, and I sometimes will run this 2 or 3 campaigns concurrent with my group. They're fine with that. They like a switch up. But sometimes we'll get into campaigns where we'll just stay with the same campaign for 6, 8 sessions in a row. So here we are. We're alphabetical. And we're starting off, this has the Oriental Adventures, Shukenja spells, things like that in here as well. Wizard spell, or cleric spells rather, priest spells, don't put a lot on the table in D&D, except when you read through these books, you have a lot more effects that you can do with the spells. So you're not just a mash unit running around getting everybody back on their feet. In fact, here's one. Azeth's Firing Frenzy. You'll see the bookmarks. Those are not my bookmarks. These, in this case, they actually belong to one of my sons. He started playing a cleric and decided to dog-ear the pages a little bit, but for whatever reason, he only bookmarked volume 1. Volumes 2 and 3 don't have any. But in this case, Azeth's Firing Frenzy works like a magic missile spell for clerics, which was kind of neat. I liked this when he introduced it into the game with his character. You get some bursts identical to magic missile. They are 5 missiles, and they do 1d4 plus 1 damage per missile. You can only target 1 creature. So it's pretty neat. I like it. It's a 6th level spell, which is pretty high. Damage is okay. Had he played the character longer, he only played him for about another 4 games after this. We might have tweaked that a little bit, or I might have had his deity give him a little divine help with it. Another spell he's got marked here is Bestow Hit Points, where you can actually take some of your hit points and give them for a time to another character. This is neat because you're actually risking your hit points. If you give 5 hit points to a character and that character goes on and gets killed, you actually lose the hit points permanently. And I would also, as the DM, I would throw some kind of system shock roll onto you, just as a kind of a penalty. So it's a Necromantic spell, it's a 5th level spell, but it's one you want to be cautious with. But it was pretty neat, and there's a lot of role-playing elements in there. And then, of course, we have curses. Bestow Major Curse, a 7th level spell. I like that kind of stuff. I like a well-thought-out curse in a D&D game. Whether a player is dumping it on a monster or vice versa, it can just be a lot of fun. Here's some major curse effects listed here, 38 of them, and then they're all explained in the next pages. And here's some minor curse effects, and then those are explained. So pretty neat. I like those. And then the last one I want to talk about was one cure. Wait, cure. Whoops, I got the wrong page marked. I marked this page for Cure Moderate Wounds. This appeared in a Dragon magazine article years ago, and it fills a desperate gap because for clerics you only get the 1st level Cure Light Wounds, and then you don't get anything until you are eligible for 4th level spells when you're 7th level, and that's a Cure Serious. That's a big gap, and especially in our campaign, you're only allowed, cleric or magic user, 3 of the same spell at a time. So 3 Cure Lights when you're walking around at 6th level is not that much divine help in curing the party. So Cure Moderate Wounds helps fill that slot, and in this case, it's a die 10 plus 1 of healing. I like that spell, and that is active in our campaign. In fact, pretty much all of our clerics end up taking a Cure Moderate Wounds or 2. Cure Scurvy is an interesting one if you're seagoing. I kind of like the idea of being able to cure scurvy. Curse of the Ever Bleeding Wounds is a 6th level necromantic spell where the wound you have to save or the wounds continue to bleed. There's just some nice stuff in here. Discern Elven Influence, which is from the Birthright campaign. I would need a very specific reason for that one. And so on. And then we end at page, in this first book, we wrap up on page 288. Like the other compendiums, the spell page goes by the old compendium. So 288, 289, page 290, and then continues on. When I write down a spell that I've found, I put volume 1, or in this case, volume 2, page 337. Then I know which volume I have to go to in addition to where the spell is. These again are listed alphabetically and not by level. So the 1st level spells can be side by side with 7th level spells. Incidentally, we've never introduced higher than 7th level spells. There are some in here in volume 3 that I'll get to in a minute that I've never really allowed. We toyed around with miracles, and some of the 3rd level spells could be adapted where you could have 8th and 9th level cleric spells. We've never taken that adaptation to our game. I'm not saying I never would, but I would need a pretty compelling reason to do it. So just some more holy symbol. When you prepare a new holy symbol, you cast could be restricted to once a day per the DM's option, or once per week. You don't want a guy having 50 holy symbols around on his person, but I don't know. It's just interesting. Holy Word, one of my favorite spells in all of AD&D. And Magnetism, Magma Tunnel. There are some good ones in here. You really have to spend some time with these books to really squeeze the most you can out of your cleric spells. Now we come to Orasan. Orasan is basically cantrips for clerics. Never really use these. They're okay. They're not great. They're not game-changing at all. They're a little better than skills, but they are spells. So they are here. It's nothing anybody's ever pressed me for. Hey, can I cast a bunch of Orsons? So I've never really had to worry about it much. Let's be honest, clerics don't come up that much in a campaign. And if they are clerics, there's a good chance they're multi-class clerics. I personally have played 2 clerics in my time. I had good success with one. The other one was a cleric of Thor who failed a save versus fear on a natural 1. Can't get by being a cleric of Thor saving versus fear. I did atone, but then I never really had a feel for the character again. Sometimes that happens. Here we go for book 3. One thing I was a little disappointed in these books when I got them is in AD&D, clerics can turn into liches. So I really thought we'd get some how-to on how to make a player character cleric lich. We didn't. A little disappointed in that. So here we go. The spells again in this, they start up on page 585. You get Spike Growth, which is kind of a neat one. First seen in Unearthed Arcana, and then later second edition Player's Handbook. Spike Stones also. As you can see, I'm not spending a ton of time on the individual spells. These books, honestly, you've got to commit to running your cleric character, or if I had somebody in my group who was very serious about their cleric, I would spend more time with these books. Because of the general paucity of clerics in at least our campaign, I have never spent a bunch of time with these books. I've read a lot of the spells out of here. I've just never spent a ton of time on it. So here we go. We're up to the W's, and now we're up to quest spells. Quest spells are interesting. They're granted higher level spells, and then they involve something usually dealing with the land or the campaign as a whole. In this case, let's take a look at Abundance, where you can make the crop come in nice and clean. Animal Horde, where you can call up, a bunch of different hit dice of monsters or animals rather, to fight for you. Again, we haven't done much with quest spells. I've had plenty of characters go on quests. I've never used quest spells. I can see that there'd be a lot of role-playing entertainment in here, and I do have a cleric lich wandering around in my campaign as a bad guy, so I am toying with taking some of these spells and maybe having him have access to them and use him as the bad guy against my players. My players are now of a sufficient level in that campaign where they're around 10th, 12th level, where they're strong enough to deal with an intelligent lich cleric. So I am toying with starting that campaign. We kind of laid that campaign off about midway through the summer of 2020, and I've come back to it for about 2 games since then. But that's one of the ones I'm thinking of restarting as my actual campaign for 2022. So here we go. Here's a whole list of orisons. Again, lots of pages of different spells. Psionics enchantments, we don't use psionics at all. And then we're coming down to level 8, 9, and 10 spells. As I said earlier, this is nothing I've really allowed in my campaign yet. No objection necessarily to levels 8 and 9 spells. I just haven't really found the need for it. And then we come down to the settings that the various spells are from. And then the priest, there's a little card from the seller, and then the priest spell index. This is what page all the spells are on by name of the spell. And then this is actually good if you're looking for a particular clump of spells like cure spells. This is a good place to look. And then there's a wizard spell index because some of the spells are also contains the priest spells in the wizard spell compendium and vice versa. So these are just some spells that might cross over into this. That would also be wizard spells. And then we come to the end. And then the errata, which is only a couple of pages, which means they did a great job or they were just short on the errata. And then we're out. So as you can see, I like these books. I've never found them as useful as the Encyclopedia Magica or the Magic User Spellbooks, simply because, in my campaign at least, clerics aren't as common. That being said, these books absolutely have a place at my table, and they do get pulled out often. These are available through DriveThruRPG. I think they're about $5 each for the download, so you can get a nice PDF of these guys for not a ton of money, and they're worth it. They're worth having, just if nothing else, as I said. Primarily, I'm going to use them as things to use in my tool chest when I'm DMing player characters to give them opposition, create games around. So that's it. That's a look at the Priest Spell Compendiums, volumes 1, 2, and 3. And there you go. And that's it for today on page 121. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.